In 2011, a retired steelworker in Youngstown, Ohio, fed himself on $22 a week for 7 months after the plant closed. He boiled stale bread with whatever vegetables he had left, and he ate it standing over the sink. That meal is number 3 on this list. A Sicilian widow in South Philadelphia kept her rent paid for 2 winters by spending almost nothing on food. Number 7 made that possible. Number 1 on this list was eaten by sharecroppers who had no oven, no refrigerator, and no choice. If any of that sounds familiar, subscribe, and let's count them down. Number 10. Pan e olio bread, olive oil, salt, and sometimes a garlic clove rubbed across the surface. You take the bread, you pour the oil, you add salt, you eat it. The oil soaks into the bread and the salt hits the back of your throat, and it tastes like the oldest meal anyone ever made. In the hill towns of Calabria and Basilicata through the 1940s and 50s, this was breakfast and sometimes dinner. Olive oil ran about 30 cents a liter from a neighbor's press, and bread was baked once a week and rationed carefully. What they called poverty, we'd call restraint. Number 9. Boiled chicory with garlic chicory greens. Garlic, olive oil, salt, and sometimes a dried chili. You boil the greens until they go soft, drain them, then cook them briefly in oil with the crushed garlic. They taste bitter first, then earthy, then warm, a flavor that takes 3 bites to understand. In Puglia in the 1930s, chicory grew wild along roadsides and cost nothing to gather, and a head of garlic went for a few lire at most. For families who grew it or foraged it, this dish appeared on the table 4 nights a week without apology. Number 8. Farinata chickpea flour, water, olive oil, salt, and rosemary if you had it. You mix the flour with water into a thin batter, let it rest. Then pour it into a wide pan and bake it until the edge is crisp and the center sets just barely. It comes out of the oven smelling like toasted nuts and dried herbs, with a texture that's somewhere between a cracker and a pancake. Ligurian bakers sold it cheap from street stalls in Genoa and La Spezia through the early 20th century. A bag of chickpea flour cost almost nothing, and it fed a family for the price of a single loaf of bread. It was fast food before fast food existed, made by people who had no time and less money. There's something that happens when you stop cooking for yourself. It doesn't announce itself. You just start skipping meals or standing over the sink with crackers, or calling dinner a handful of something you didn't bother to heat up. It creeps in after a loss or a long stretch of loneliness, or just exhaustion, the kind that makes even boiling water feel like too much. These meals weren't made by people who felt inspired. They were made by people who decided, quietly, that they were still worth feeding. That decision is the whole thing. Number 7. Seserkia, soup seserkia, an ancient legume like a small rough chickpea. Water, garlic, rosemary, olive oil, and salt. You soak the seserkia overnight, simmer them for hours until they soften and the broth thickens on its own. The soup is dense and faintly smoky, with a flavor deeper than lentils, older tasting somehow. In the Marche and Umbria regions through the post-war decades, dried seserkia cost almost nothing, a kilogram for a few hundred lire, and a single pot fed a household for 2 days. This was survival food that required patience, which meant it was also food for people who had learned to be patient. Number 6. Aquacata, stale bread, water or weak broth, onion, tomato, olive oil, egg, and salt. You cook the vegetables down in oil, add the water, then slide an egg into the broth and let it poach while the bread softens underneath. It arrives at the table smelling of onion and wood smoke, the egg just set, the bread gone almost to porridge. Tuscan shepherds and farm workers ate this in the Maremma region in the early 1900s. Tomatoes came from their own gardens, eggs from their own chickens, and the bread was already days old and going to waste regardless. The name means cooked water, and they named it honestly. Number 5. Frisella with tomato, frisella, a twice-baked ring of hard bread. Ripe tomato, olive oil, salt, and sometimes oregano or basil. You soak the frisella briefly in water to soften it, then press the tomato into the surface and add the oil and salt. The bread absorbs everything and the tomato turns sweet against it, and the oil ties it all together. Along the Adriatic and Ionian coasts of southern Italy through the mid-20th century, fishermen carried friselle on boats because they kept for weeks without spoiling. A bag cost almost nothing, and the tomatoes came from whatever grew near the door. This was a meal that traveled, that kept, that asked for almost nothing, and gave back what you needed. Think about what processed food actually costs, not just in money, but in what it asks of you. A frozen dinner costs $4 and leaves you feeling vaguely cheated. These meals cost less and required only that you stand at a stove for 20 minutes and pay attention. Somewhere along the way, paying attention started to feel like a luxury. It isn't. It's the only thing that separates eating from just consuming. Number 4. Polenta with lard coarse cornmeal, water, salt, and lard. Sometimes a little aged cheese, if there was any. You stir the cornmeal into salted boiling water slowly, and you keep stirring. And after 40 minutes, it pulls away from the pot and you spoon it out onto a board. It smells like corn and wood smoke and fat, and it fills you in a way that bread does not. In Veneto and Lombardy through the 19th century and well into the 20th, polenta was the staple of the rural poor. A sack of cornmeal cost almost nothing. Lard was rendered from the same pig that fed the family all winter. For generations of northern Italian families, this was not a side dish. It was the meal. Number 3. Pasta e fagioli pasta. White beans, garlic, tomato, olive oil, salt, rosemary, and sometimes a parmesan rind. You cook the beans until soft, mash some of them into the broth to thicken it, then cook the pasta directly in the pot. It comes out thick, almost stew-like, smelling of garlic and rosemary and something ancient. In Naples and the surrounding countryside across the 20th century, a bag of dried navy beans cost 69 cents in the 1970s. The pasta cost less, and this pot fed 5 people without asking much. It was the meal that kept showing up, in lean months, in grief, in the weeks after someone left or someone died. Number 2. Ribollita stale bread, cannellini beans, cavolo nero, carrot, celery, onion, tomato, olive oil, and salt. You make a vegetable and bean soup, then add the old bread and let it absorb everything. Then the next day you reheat it. Ribollita means reboiled. The second day it is thicker, darker, more itself. It smells of black cabbage and olive oil and thyme. Tuscan contadini, tenant farmers, made this through the winter months of the 1930s and 40s, stretching a pot of vegetables across 3 or 4 days when dried beans cost 40 cents a kilo, and bread was never thrown away. The dish improved with age, which was a kind of mercy in a life that did not offer many. There are kitchens in this country that used to be full. A table where 4 people ate now seats 1, or none. The recipes got smaller, or they disappeared. Learning to cook for yourself after years of cooking for others is one of the quieter losses no one warns you about. These meals were made by people who understood that. They cooked for themselves because they were worth cooking for. Number 1, panzanella stale bread, ripe tomatoes, red onion, cucumber, basil, olive oil, red wine vinegar, and salt. You soak the old bread in water and squeeze it out, then tear it into a bowl with the vegetables and dress everything with oil and vinegar. The tomatoes bleed into the bread and the vinegar cuts through the oil, and it tastes like late summer and necessity and something that should not work as well as it does. In Tuscany through the 1930s and 40s, this was a way to use bread that was otherwise finished. Tomatoes from the garden, a bottle of vinegar that cost almost nothing, olive oil from the press. This was a meal that turned what was almost garbage into something worth sitting down for. This week, make one of these. Just one. Not all 10. One. Pick the one that sounds most like something you could do on a Tuesday night with what you already have. Then sit at the table. Not the couch. Set a place. Eat it slow. And tell me in the comments if you had to choose between ribollita and pasta e fagioli for a long winter. Which one carries you further? These meals were never about nutrients or savings. They were about a person deciding they were still worth the effort. That is dignity. That is the whole point.